Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's Generation Digital Workforce. This is Zena coming at you from Austin, Texas. This week, I'm pleased to bring to you our third edition in our Empower Hour series from Women in RPA. This conversation is being led by Darren Edgar. In today's session, Darren will dig into how to get into the intelligent automation industry, how to identify the right role, and how to amplify your transferable skills so that you can land your dream job in intelligent automation. Let's join the ladies in their conversation.
It's really great to have everyone joining us today for the next event in our series. Hopefully some of you have been to our prior sessions, and it's also great to have everyone who's joining us for the first time today. My name is Darren Edgar, and I'm going to be your host for this session. The Empower Hour is a program that's part of the Women in RPA group. This group was formed by a group of women from several companies in the RPA and intelligent automation sector, and they represent vendors, consulting firms, end users, and influencers in this market space. The purpose is to celebrate and encourage talent in order to build a strong global network of talented and innovative professionals. The purpose of these sessions, the Empower Hour, is to provide just a fun way to chat, get to know people, showcase talent, and in doing so, create some opportunities for our members. So today we're going to talk about the topic that I'll introduce in a minute or two. We've got some amazing panelists that have joined us, but we'll just kind of go through a couple housekeeping things. We've got 60 minutes, so we'll go until 10 a.m. British summertime. Doesn't seem like it's the summer anymore, but we are still on BST. And everybody who's participating is on mute. We are going to be recording it, so it'll be available to you. We're using a tool called Glisser to engage with everyone, so we learn a little bit more about you. So all your questions can be submitted via the Q&A section, and you can vote on the questions. So at the end, there's going to be a longish section for questions and answers for the panelists, and we'll pick the most popular questions. We're also doing some polls as we go along to learn a little bit about you and also kind of facilitate what we're talking about in the session. So the data from these will be distributed to the group as well. So it's something you'll have access to later on. So to get things going, we're actually going to start with our first poll. And the first poll is asking you, what area was your early education or experience in? Because it's useful to kind of understand what the depth and breadth of backgrounds that people are coming from that are interested in intelligent automation. Helps us think about, what might be possible for ourselves, and also when we're thinking about building our teams, what's common and unique across people, and how are the transitions happening. So this one will be displayed in a word cloud, and I'm entering my own very boring background in accounting. So that will be displayed in a second or two in the panel that you're looking at in the Glisser environment. Today, what we're going to talk about is a little more of a conversational and human topic. We're going to talk about how people who are currently working in intelligent automation and RPA got there. What was their journey? How did they get there from other roles, other companies, other industries? And it's going to be less about top tips and more about their stories. Literally, how did this happen for you? And hopefully that'll give us some background to think about, what's possible for myself? What kinds of things can I think about if I'm looking at moving forward? So we're going to let our panelists introduce themselves and share a bit about their current role, their experience in this space and their background, and then we'll move into hearing a little bit about their stories. We've got three ladies joining us: Hannah Bakken, Rebecca Keenan, and Jennifer Valenti. If I could start with Hannah, would you be able to just share a bit of your background with us?
Definitely. Yeah. So my name is Hannah Bakken, and I work for Blue Prism's internal automation team as a process analyst and RPA developer, a team that I joined actually just over a year ago. So my job varies quite a bit day to day, but I guess you can say that my two main tasks, which it's also suggested in my job title, is to identify business processes within the company that can be automated and to build the automation using the Blue Prism software. So what I like about being part of this team is that I feel like our team is in quite a unique position. So most of our Blue Prism customers have their own automation teams or center of excellences, as they're sometimes called as well. And so because we're sort of mirroring these teams, doing a lot of the same stuff as our customers, we get to see a lot of the same challenges and opportunities that they face, which we can then communicate to the rest of the organization to give them an idea of how we can, improve our product and our offerings for our customers. We also sit closely to the AI labs within Blue Prism. We're a bunch of people basically with PhDs in machine learning. So these guys work a lot on new products that we sometimes get to pilot as well before they go live, which I think is pretty cool. So I personally love my job. I love that I can be a developer without having, a technical background, which I will talk a little bit more about later today as well. And the reason why I'm here today and the reason why I joined WRPA is because I really do want to share a bit more about my story, and then hopefully I can influence other women as well to join the industry.
Thanks, Hannah. It's not trivial being a panelist. And so, sharing and kind of even giving thought to sort of what your background was and means and what are the sort of the points that you want to kind of let everybody know about. It's pretty significant. Thanks for that. Rebecca, could I ask you to go next?
Yeah, so my name is Rebecca Keenan. I'm the head of process automation for Expleo Group. So we're a service provider, and there I run our global center of excellence. And essentially I head up strategy, delivery, and innovation. So I'm actually based in Dublin at the moment, but we have teams right across Europe, North America, and APAC. And I think that's probably one of my favorite parts of my job is I've got to see the team grow, meet new people, new clients, and really just make a difference with what we're doing within the kind of automation space. I guess my day-to-day varies quite a lot. I don't think any week I have is the same as the last, but it kind of goes between sales and pre-sales, so crafting solutions for our clients, figuring out the best way to implement some of the technology we use. I'm also meeting with our teams, making sure that they're happy, that they're getting everything they need. Innovation. So I think we're probably all aware in this market that it changes quite a lot. Every time I open LinkedIn, I feel like there's a new tool or a new solution being pushed out. So, we put a little bit of thought behind, well, what are we going to focus on? What makes sense for our team? So yeah, like Hannah said, I'll go a little bit later on into how this all happened, but that's what I do day to day.
Thanks, Rebecca. We've got a pretty spread out group today, which is kind of nice because we're trying to have more of a global audience. So it's great to have you in Dublin and, Hannah on this side of the world. And Jennifer wins the prize for being the panelist that stayed up the latest. She's in the United States and just stayed up to be able to join us today. Didn't actually have a little nap in between. Jen, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, it's great to be here, first of all. Excited to participate in this panel. Excited to learn more about WRPA as I'm actually participating in it. So it's a real honor for that. I am Jennifer Valenti. I'm a global intelligent automation executive. I've been working in intelligent automation for 7 years, which makes me a dinosaur in this area. I prior to that worked in process automation and process excellence and have a financial services background primarily. But basically I work at every layer of the C-suite with strategy. So taking automation either from an RPA perspective all the way up to AI and interleaving that throughout the strategy for the organization. So I'm excited here to talk a little bit more about that, but also to talk about my journey because it was very accidental, which I think with this technology being an emerging technology, I think a lot of us sort of tripped and fell into it in some ways. So I hope that it will demystify the opportunity to get into this industry and also provide a really wide open door to all the opportunities that it has. So great to be here.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, and we're hoping for a sort of as uncut and unfiltered set of stories as everyone feels comfortable with, because I think, most of us, now we all go to a lot of webinars and we go to a lot of online community events and so forth. So things where you're hearing an actual human story, I think that's what most people are actually interested. They're not just interacting with a screen. They're actually hearing something from a real live person. So after hearing a little bit about our panelists' background and what they're doing, where they sit, what kind of company they're in, I'd like to ask the audience for a bit of an initial reflection. So this will be another Glisser poll. If you think about your own background and experiences, how applicable do you actually think they are right now, perhaps a little earlier on in your journey to intelligent automation? Do you think you were born for this? Do you think you were, raised by RPA wolves? Or do you think it actually is not very applicable to you at all? Or are you somewhere in between where you might have to repackage your story or repurpose some of your experiences? Or do you think there's some other little piece of effort in the middle there? So it'd be good to get, a bit of background. I've just cast my little vote in there. So it'll be an interesting story to hear what our panelists have been through. And then at the end of that, we're actually going to kind of go back to this question and revisit, now that you've learned a little bit about what other people's journeys are like, how do we feel about it now? So joining us today, our panelists are the point of this conversation. How did you get here? What did the journey look like? Was it a straight or curvy path? Was it a key project, technique, or relationship, or, did you just get dropped in it as Jen thought she did? For the introductions, I kind of went Hannah, Rebecca, Jen. I'm going to go in the reverse order this time, and it's a good jumping off point from where you finished off, Jen. Would you share with us how you fell into this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually running the automation portfolio across shared services at Citibank. And we had started off with just workflow. Basically, that was our extent of our automation. Maybe that and maybe like some string, but other than that, we weren't really innovating. And in 2013, we had a changing of the guard. Basically, that's when Mike Corbat took over. If you know anything about Citibank's history in terms of the CEO, which now is going to be taken over by the first female global bank CEO in the world, Jane Fraser. So I just want to give that a moment. Amazing. But back when Mike Corbat had taken over, he was really tasked with, future-proofing the bank. We had just finally come out of the other side of a terrible financial crisis, and we really needed to take the time to shore up the banks and to make sure that we were, creating efficiencies everywhere we went. So we actually hired a group to come in and do an assessment of the bank and identify areas where we were not leveraging either key processes or key technologies. And that's where intelligent automation came from. And since shared services is sort of the low-hanging fruit of operations and processes, it sort of fell to me to be the steward of these, pilots that we had decided to invest in. And if I could just, it would not be too dramatic to say if anything could have gone wrong, it did in the first year, because not only were we trying to figure out this new technology that none of us knew anything about, but so were our vendors. It was so brand new that a lot of our vendors still weren't really sure about the enterprise landscape and how to, take this incredible innovation and sort of retrofit this into an overly regulated space. And so for the very first year, it was really about trying to figure out, does this even fit in a banking architecture? Well, turns out it does. And eventually we were able to, get through some of those teeth-cutting moments to finally find our footing and to really create value across the bank. And I think that Citi being an early adopter, which I think a lot of people know, the Citi story, if you don't, it was and really has been a trailblazer for a couple of the technologies out there that would be considered the leading IA tools. It really helped to legitimize these technologies in a way that they hadn't had before. So it really created this movement. And from there, we just, I rode those coattails all the way to a great career. So, in all honesty, timing is sometimes everything. And also raising your hand and going for those opportunities that seem scary or seem completely out of your depth. And just saying, I can do this. And I want to say just one thing, especially to any women that are listening, we really struggle with not having the confidence to put ourselves forward. And I just want to say, you got to stop doing that. Raise your hand. You can do this. You'll get through it. You'll figure it out and fake it till you make it. Okay. Because you have plenty of time to use all the corporate buzzwords you can until you finally get to success. Just don't be afraid of it. Honestly, it's easy. And if you know process and you have good instincts, then that's all the background that you're going to need.
Such an interesting story, because it sounds like sort of the linchpin was that project, that first those pilot projects.
Absolutely. And it was a disaster. I mean, it took us a really long time to even get something into production. I will tell you one last very funny story because it's worth telling. When we first looked into this technology, to tell you how far away we were from reality, I had to attend a board style meeting of these upper echelon senior executives, and we were going to talk about robotics. And one of the agenda items was whether or not we were going to need new real estate for all these robots.
Well, you raise a good point. There's sort of basic terminology and understanding that when something is a new technology, the world just doesn't have.
Right. No. So I had to, with a straight face, let them know that this was software and not hardware. But that's the learning curve, right? So, I mean, that's how far back we started this. Now, intelligent automation's everywhere. It's practically in the DNA of organizations. We've reached such a critical mass now that there's so many opportunities out there. You could basically write your own ticket still in this industry.
That's so encouraging. Thank you. Rebecca, you were in the middle last time. You're in the middle again because there's three of you, but...
Yeah, no, that's funny from Jen as well, because I know we have a running joke in my team about what kind of seats we need to buy for the robots, and is a different chair to what we use. But I guess similar to Jen, it was kind of a happy accident that I ended up where I am, and we just haven't kind of looked back since. But about 4 years ago, I actually, straight out of college, so it was my first job moving into Expleo, and I joined the business analysis service essentially. And I had come out of my educational background, which was computer science and business. So I had a joint degree, but I very early on made the conscious decision to retire my computer science part of that degree, or I thought I was going to make that decision. So I didn't want to go down the developer route. So that's why I was kind of in BA. And really about 6 months later, so I was still kind of fresh-faced, not really knowing what I was doing. I'm big enough to admit that now, but someone asked me if I knew what RPA stood for. And I said, no, never heard of it. And they said, well, can you go learn about it? And I said, oh, okay. And I went to Google, which I go to for many of my first endeavors when I hear something new. And I typed in RPA. I was so naive at the time when I think back now. And I said, oh, this is pretty cool. And I downloaded some of the tools, and I was like, oh, this is kind of exciting, robots. And I was always kind of interested in that process element of how can we take a process and, make it more efficient. And this seemed to fit really well. I then realized that our company, which didn't do this at the time, had a real opportunity to do it, because we're a big believer, and still a big believer, that to actually make a program like IA or RPA work, you need to take that business and technology focus. So again, when we look at, I'm not the developer. I was never the developer on the team. We have developers, BAs, project managers, change managers, and testers as part of our core role. So again, that's a very broad subset of, the types of talent that we hire into the team and the types of talent that we need to actually do these projects. But I guess if I go back then to how we kind of started growing the practice, and, the team back in the day was myself, so we probably couldn't call it a team. But, we just grew, and I learned everything I could. I reached out to my network. I had this warped sense of it was going to work out. I was probably annoying to be around at the time, but I was like, no, this is perfect. Everything's going to be fine. Because the first sell I actually had to make was internally, because before I could even reach a client, I had to convince the people around me that this is something we could do, we could deliver it, we could sell it, because it's such a new way of working. Again, that's learning curve of, sorry, my new colleague is not going to be a person I sit beside, it's going to be a robot. That's a kind of an interesting conversation to have. But yeah, we started selling. We got our first client. We got our second one. We got some more. We added in new technologies. The team grew. And yeah, we haven't looked back since. So I think at the beginning of 2018, the team in January alone grew by about 300%. So we had to get really, really good at, doing the right thing every time, building out a program for training and delivery that, was robust, and we could grow it, because again, that growth didn't come from just one country. That growth came from 3 different territories. And again, I was at the head of it and people were looking at me for answers, and I was looking behind me and there was no one there. And I was like, okay, I have to come up with this. So, put your big boy pants on and let's go, or your big girl pants on and go. And yeah, so that kind of led us to today, where I run our kind of global offering. I work with regional leads across the group. I have a fantastic team. I'm pretty biased, but I think my team's one of the best going anywhere across IIA at the moment. Yeah, and we have fun doing it. So it's been a blessing. Now, it sounds kind of easy when I say it like that, much like Jen. Sometimes I felt like anything that could have gone wrong, I felt like the universe was working against us at times. But, deep breaths. Remember that, we're still humans at the end of the day, even if we're building robots. So take that into account, have empathy, and have fun while you're doing it.
Both of you have sort of described a bit of an element of having to convince people about what you were doing or the path that you were on. How much do you think those sort of selling skills or influencing skills contributed to your experience?
Critical.
Yeah.
You have to have that. If you don't have the power of persuasion, particularly with something that can be complex, especially to a broader subset of individuals and stakeholders, then it will really hamstring your success.
Yeah, I think as well, because there's so many different sets of talent that you need to have as well. Like, all of us learn in different ways. We take on information in different ways. How I speak and to my developers would be very different to the change managers, to the testers, and having that ability to switch between conversations has been key, I think.
I just want to say one thing about Rebecca's story that I think is just incredibly inspiring. Rebecca, you said that you've been 4 years out of school?
Coming up to 5, so I'm pushing on now. Yeah.
And you are the head of process automation for a company. This is just such a great example of having an opportunity at the right time in your career, because I'm 100 years old. It would be, I should expect to be where I am at my age, but to be where you are at your age, it's incredible. It's such an incredible testament to your talent. Thank you. What you have brought into this industry. It should really be inspirational to the women that are, in your age group and coming up behind you.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah.
When we're sort of taking a look at panelists, we are trying to gather up a group that sort of comes from different backgrounds and stages. So today it's really nice to have different sort of career journeys and time frames and that sort of thing. It makes it more valuable when you're listening to kind of what people's stories have been. Hannah, it's time for us to hear about what's happened to you. I'm sure you've got some nuggets of some bumps in the road as well.
Thanks, Darren. So like I mentioned, I guess, in my introduction, I've only been in this industry for a bit over a year, so quite fresh. And I joined my current job straight out of university. So I'm originally from Norway, but I moved to London about 5 years ago to study international business. I think throughout my time at university, doing my undergrad and also various internships that I did, I developed a very strong interest for emerging technologies and also the effect that they have on different industries and society as a whole, I guess. And so I decided to also apply for a master's degree in management of information systems and digital innovation, which is a bit of a mouthful. We just used to refer to it as MISTI. It's a lot easier. So this master's was mostly about studying the theory behind the technology, so the research and the management of it. It wasn't particularly technical. So at this point in time, I had kind of settled on the fact that with, my business background, I could have a career where I could use my passion for technology and the theoretical knowledge that I had gotten as well. But I never thought that I could be an actual software developer. And for that, I thought I would have to study something more techy, like you, Rebecca, like computer science, for example. So in terms of my first, encounter with RPA, I like to think that I had two kind of first encounters. So the first one was when I was sitting in a lecture at university. I just started my master's. This presentation rota where all of us had to present about something, and the lecturer asked for volunteers for the first presentation, which was about RPA robotics. So I was just thinking to myself, there's no way I'm doing this. I had no idea what it was, but I wasn't going to volunteer because robotics, that's way too hard for me to be presenting on next week. So I obviously decided not to volunteer, which is quite funny now, I think. But the next, I'd say, first encounter then would be the week after, when the student who actually did volunteer presented on it, and I learned what it actually was, beyond its difficult name, I guess. And this is also when I realized what the technology is. You don't even need a tech background to be able to do this. And so I found this super interesting. And so I also decided to write my dissertation on it. So it was quite a bit of a time where I was just researching the technology. I got more excited about it. I went to, Blue Prism World, which is the big event that Blue Prism does every year for customers and partners, and was very impressed by the company. And like I mentioned, I thought the idea of a software that you didn't need a tech background to use was very interesting and also powerful, because in a way it's democratizing technology, right? Which I thought was pretty cool. And I also remember one of the selling points for me, and one of the things that I was thinking without really knowing the answer to this, was because in most developer roles, there are mostly men who hold these jobs, partly because there's so many more men, I guess, doing degrees in computer science and software engineering. So I remember thinking that this could also mean that there would be more women in the RPA industry, which I thought was, it made it sound more appealing to me as well. So yeah, I guess the long story short, when Blue Prism's internal automation team were then recruiting for graduates, I decided to apply, and here I am a year later.
I love your story. It's such an interesting angle on kind of your education and the decisions you made, and then the day that the penny dropped and you realized, oh, you don't actually have to be particularly technical, and there would be a space for you in this industry. How did you feel that day?
Yeah, I thought it was great, because like I mentioned, I'd sort of settled on, I was very interested in technology. I was I've always liked, quantitative subjects and technical stuff as well. But I thought, okay, so because I chose to do business, unless I want to start over, I just need to do more of a business role. I cannot go into anything technical. So that was super exciting, and just realized that, oh, I could.
Yeah. Amazing, the power of possibility, isn't it? We're going to move into the Q&A section now, which is where things start to get interesting. But we're going to do the same poll again. After sort of hearing from these ladies and their stories and kind of what contributed to how they ended up here, now, if you think about your own background, how applicable do you think it is now? Do you feel like it's a little more applicable, or do you see maybe some challenges that you didn't see before? Has it changed for you at all? I think if we think about, some of the comments that the ladies have made, for most of us, I think we can kind of see a pathway that maybe wasn't necessarily the original view that we had. So we're going to get into some questions and answers now, and we've got some awesome questions on the Q&A list. The most popular one, I think we'll start there, because it's a topic that each person has touched on a little bit. So the question reads as, what does diversity look like in your teams? And in terms of whether it's gender or ethnicity, do you think there's any advantages to having some of that diversity for your own journey? Or a couple of you have also referenced how you grew a team, and were there some advantages to using diversity in that growth? If I could start with you, Jen.
So I've had a really great career and have had wonderful opportunities across a lot of the companies that I've worked with to not only drive diversity, but recruit for diversity. And that's actually really important for me. It's actually part of who I am as my brand in terms of mentoring and bringing up women and diversity of all kinds. And so my teams typically reflect probably some of the more diverse across our organizations that I've worked in. And I just think that there's a number of reasons why that's advantageous. First and foremost, obviously, I'm a bit biased as being a woman and being a mother and having to balance a million things with, 5 plates on my head. I really understand how difficult it is for women to have to make sacrifices. And so I like to bring women into my teams and then provide them with a lot of balance in their career, particularly if they're younger women and they're going through those milestones that women go through of having children and having to make decisions about whether or not they're going to re-enter the workforce. I like to give the opportunity to have the consciousness of being able to take that gap and come back and pick up right where they started. So that's the first part of diversity, is really making sure that women have career paths as they look across the different milestones of their life that don't have anything to do with their career. The second part of that is having a lot of different thoughts that come from a lot of different diversities across the globe. So whether that is not just the American teams that I work with, but also my regional global teams that I also work with, understanding that we all have a different point of view and that we also come from very different backgrounds and also think very differently. I have very different conversations with my teams in China than I do with my teams in New York. They're very different thinkers and they have a very different analysis, way of analyzing the work that we do. And it's incredible to get both perspectives because we can often marry both of those perspectives and have a really strong perspective across, many different diverse topics. So I think that those are the two biggest reasons why I just think it's absolutely unparalleled to have the most diverse team that you can. And that goes between gender as well as, regional and cross-regional diversity.
Before we move on to another question, another panelist, I actually just want to bring our attention back to the poll for a second because the results are pretty interesting. The first go round for those top two options, we sort of had like a high 20, a low 30 on those. And coming back after listening to you folks, it's come back as, 80%. I can probably transition my skills. So that's due to listening to your stories and hearing some of the good, bad, and the ugly of what you've been through. Is it has shown our audience that these things are possible. These moves are something that they can start thinking about for themselves. It's interesting. I'm glad we did it that way. It's turned out quite well. Could have gone either way. On the diversity topic, Hannah, Rebecca, did you have anything to add to that?
I think Jen summed it up well. I think there's we all know that we all do better with more diversity in companies. If someone's telling you otherwise, just don't even bother talk to them, is my opinion. But there's definitely still work to be done. So I think from my perspective, my team still today, and it's a woman who heads the team, is still skewed towards male. And sometimes when I step back and look at that, it's like, well, why is that? Because, there's decisions being made with recruitment across the board. And something that I try to focus on as a kind of woman in a leading role within the industry is, well, how can we try to make that better? And what I feel I can do is I always go in and I talk to our grads. So I'm heavily involved in our grad program. Again, making sure that we're changing the messaging because sometimes people, when they come to our grad program, they think they have to be very technical. So it's working with the recruitment team to make the job ads seem like that's not true anymore. So come in with all kinds of backgrounds. And something else that I've started doing, which I actually believe is key as well, is I've started going to schools. So 4 and 5-year-olds, because that's where some of those key decisions that they don't even know they're making, but they're being shaped into, why maybe more women aren't going into STEM education, which then makes a difference when they come out and they're looking for jobs. So I have a sister who's a teacher. So she was kind of the test case, and her kids were the test case I went into. And I bought a robot, and we talked about, how a robot, even like on your iPad, there's robots in your iPad and what that looks like. And I did buy a physical robot because I wanted them to think I was a little bit cooler than I probably am. But again, it's having those conversations early on. So there's not one right way to get more women into the industry. And if we had that answer, wouldn't that be great? But when I look at the power that I have and what I can do, there are two things that I found are kind of making that difference from my perspective. So I guess that's it. We all have the power to do something. So let's take it.
Is that something that you've seen in your story, maybe going through education and new to a new company, Honey?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I agree on everything that you girls have been saying. But yeah, so I also think that obviously diversity is a huge deal. I think my team, particularly in the company, is considered to be quite diverse. We're about 9 people. 3 of us are women. We have one, woman of color. So I think that it's good. It's something to celebrate. But like Rebecca mentioned, it's also something that you should celebrate it, but you should also always try and reach for a higher number, right? So diversity is always good. It makes, I think, a more diverse team. It makes people feel more comfortable at work. It makes you feel like you can bring your personality more to work if it's not just one type of person that's in that team, right? But one of the things I'd like to add as well is I think it's super important to bring in diverse people onto the team, but it's also very important, obviously, to make the work environment comfortable for a diverse team. So you don't just, recruit people because you want to fill your quotas and then that's that. You also need to make sure that this is a workplace that you want to be in, regardless of your background. I think is very important.
Make sure it's connected. Makes sense. If you think of all the factors that contributed to your journey, what role did your network or your business and personal relationships play in the journey? Were they impactful? Were they useful? How much did they drive the success you've had? Does that resonate with any one of you to sort of compare to what you've been through?
I wouldn't have had my role probably if I didn't have my female supervisor's support. The woman I worked for at Citi was by far the most supportive manager I've ever had. And it was really refreshing to have that because it hadn't been my experience up until that. I think it's interesting because we do have a generational gap between me and Rebecca and Hannah. So their generation has so much more opportunity and has so much more reflection of who they are staring back at them. Whereas 10 years ago for me, I was always the only woman at the table constantly, if I even had a seat at the table. Obviously, sometimes I was in the back of the room. And that's really the truth, is just that having someone to finally just say, I'm going to support you. And not only that, but I'm going to stump for you and say that, this is the right person for the job. It's critical. It's a critical to your career. And if I didn't have that, it never would have happened, period. So I really do, honestly, and there's actually two sides of that. I credit her for getting me in to this program and giving me the opportunity. And I also credit my technology counterpart for making me successful, because the truth is that she only got me the opportunity, but there's only so much she can do to cheerlead for me. Obviously, there's going to be air cover that I'm going to require as I'm navigating this new technology and this new way of working. And what really also helped me was my technology counterpart, who was a gentleman, who was incredibly supportive and who was very aligned with me in meetings. So every time I said something, he backed me up and validated it. And having not only the opportunity, but also having the support once I got that opportunity to continue to look like I had the credibility that I needed was really key.
It sounds like the environment in those projects that you were part of, Jenna, was pretty collaborative in terms of the team.
It has to be, yeah.
Mm.
Rebecca, were you about to say something?
Yeah, no, it's just a lot of that kind of resonated. And I guess it's women like Jen who fought a little bit harder than I had to sometimes, that we say thank you to. But yeah, I definitely, and it's something that like you can't be an island. And I think sometimes in my earlier career, I was a young woman coming up. My career moved quicker than some people around me thought was appropriate. So there was there was difficulties from that personal side of having to deal with stuff. But our regional MD across UKI and Expleo was such a supporter, and it was so key because kind of like what Jen said, anytime I wavered, he said, "What? No, you're fine. Go. You're good. I have your back." And knowing that he was there to support made such a difference, because I think sometimes I think he saw something before I even saw it, because I walked into his office 6 months. I wasn't even out of the grad program yet, and he said, "Okay, what's your plan?" And I gave him my grandiose plan, and he said, "All right, off you go." Like, he didn't have to do that, but he said, "Off you go, have fun." And luckily it worked out, I think, for both of us. But it was so key, and having those pillars around you, because there's things that you want to get off your chest, but you can't do that in every audience. So having those people around you who can be guidance, who you can rant to sometimes, because that's just as important, is so key. And I guess my dad as well. If he charged me for all the consultancy he gave me, I'd be broke. But so that's been key as well.
Don't ever underestimate a good private cry, ladies, by the way. Just don't feel ashamed. If you just need to take a minute and cry, go right ahead.
Hannah, you just talked about your transition from education into being at Blue Prism World. How did you form those relationships? How did you start?
Yeah, so I think for me, my network didn't really play as much of a part in all of this, in this journey as for Rebecca and Jen. One of the things I would like to mention, though, is that I was very lucky. So my dissertation supervisor was actually, his name is Leslie Wilcox, one of the researchers out there with the most experience with RPA. So that has been incredibly helpful. And he's been very supportive along the way, telling me about Blue Prism. He's also the one who made it possible for me to go to Blue Prism World and just really pushing for that and giving me all the time that I needed to complete my research, which was absolutely amazing. So I think that really played a very important part for me to get where I am as well.
Interesting. You've all talked about a strong sponsor in your background and having that cheerleader, that sounding board, a bit of mentorship, and the person who's got your back when you're trying to move your projects forward.
I think hard work as well is key. I always tell people that's great. It's great. You need those mentors, but like no one cares as much about your career as you do. So sometimes, remember that. It's great to have people to give you a helping hand, but you do have that power to create some of those opportunities as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
There's a really interesting question that's been voted fairly highly, and it goes like this. If you went back in time, would you still join the RPA industry knowing what you know now? And given that all of you are sort of slightly different backgrounds and different stages, you might have different views on that. Hanne, what are your thoughts from sort of the time you've been in the space?
Yeah, I think for me, definitely. So I went into the industry and I was already so excited about it. Like all of my friends would make fun of me all the time for this because I wouldn't stop talking about RPA, So I was quite sure and I had quite high expectations when I joined the industry at first. But I also do think that it's just been incredible, both the team that I'm working for and also learning how to become an RPA developer. It's been great. I wouldn't change it.
Rebecca, if you looked backwards, would you still make the same decisions?
I would, yeah. So I think sometimes it's so much fun working in this industry, and sometimes I think that's forgotten. But like one of my favorite parts of my job is when you watch someone you just built their first robot for them, they're seeing it work for the first time, and their face just lights up. Like that's still one of the most simple yet favorite parts of my job. And the thing with RPA as well is and every kind of tooling, Blue Prism, UiPath, AA, across the board, they're all moving towards creating an ecosystem for automation. So if you get into RPA, you're going to realize that very quickly you're then learning about other adjacent technologies as well. And you're learning about, that end-to-end automation and what that looks like. So it's just, it's opportunity after opportunity to learn new things. And in my opinion, anyway, it's never boring.
Jen, it's a little bit different stage for you, but would you do anything differently or make the same decisions?
Yeah, I was going to say, how far back do I get to go? 20 years ago, I was a film and television producer. So
that's interesting. Yeah, lots of changes.
How far can I go back? So look, to be honest with you, film and television was my first love. I ended up having to change my career because of September 11th. I was living in New York City at the time. That's actually how I segued into, the career I have now. And I'm extremely, extremely thankful for the opportunities that I've had. So the truth is, even though film and television was my first love and, we can't control some of the things that happen in our lives that put us on a different course, I wouldn't change it. I've actually had a really amazing time and have met amazing people and have traveled the world, with this job. So it's honestly, all of the upsides have far outweighed any momentary downsides we've had, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe that's a good point just to say to the women on the phone calls. Sometimes it's easy for us to sit here and reflect, and in hindsight is a wonderful thing. But there will be days where you question everything and you cannot find in a log why something went wrong. There's a client shouting at you and your team is stressed and you're stressed. But once you're having more good days than bad, that's the key, I think. So just to base it in reality too, it's not some kind of fairy tale world. I think sometimes we can forget in hindsight, it all seems easy. But sometimes if you think back to, I remember one time on a Friday having to fly on a Monday to Chicago because something was going wrong and the absolute panic of everything. So it's half the fun now looking back because we survived and it's a war story that we have. But there is challenges, so not that we're hiding from them. It's just they make you better, they make you stronger.
So if we move our viewpoint from hindsight to foresight, what do you folks think is the next opportunity? There's a question in the list that says, what will you do next in your career? What do you think the main areas for women looking at RPA are right now? And while you start answering that question, we've got our final poll, which is what do you think the key ingredients for making this transition are? And, if we tie that into the opportunities that you see, that can kind of help move us forward. Rebecca, what are your thoughts on that?
What we're kind of focusing on at the moment is this digital workforce, and it's been talked about before, but I think some of the technology has caught up to allow us to actually do that. So something that we talk about a lot is that combination of human and digital. So I think everyone's going to have to, whether they like it or not, get used to having some type of robo assistant, or their job, anywhere from 10 upwards % of their job will be in collaboration with a human. So I think, that mind shift, if you still need to do a bit of work there, do some research on it, do some reading, download some of the tools, have a look at them, because I think that shift is where I see a lot of almost, I guess, slowing down of programs sometimes, because you do need to have your people on side. So I think that's something that we're focusing on moving forward. The technology, obviously, you need to focus on it, but I don't believe you can fully take advantage of the technology available to us if you're not also bringing your people along with you. I think that's kind of where I see the industry moving in the next couple of years, more of that combination.
It's really interesting. Jen, what are your thoughts about sort of the future and where women in RPA can go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the mind that I think at some point, Hannah, you're going to have to close your ears on this one. I think at some point, most of the applications we work to do our everyday jobs are going to be intelligent enabled anyway. I think that there will be, it's just a matter of time. We already see it, right? With, things like Vermilia and now S4HANA. I think at some point, the RPA industry itself was going to go through an evolution. We're already seeing that. Obviously, we saw it with more point solutions and bolt-ons with artificial intelligence. And now I think we're going to see a lot more of it just being embedded in the everyday applications that we use. I agree with Rebecca a lot that we have to look at how we coexist in this digital world and how we actually not only leverage these automations, but actually work with them in our everyday lives to make us more productive and more innovative. And not just production when it comes to time and motion and saving 15 minutes out of your day, but really how does it actually help to buoy your innovation and your creativity in ways that we probably haven't thought about it, quite yet. So I think that there's obviously it's huge green field. And I do think that there's so much opportunity out there. And I think we really just only literally tiny scratched the surface on what these technologies can do.
Yeah, I think I very much agree with you there, Jen. And I also think you mentioned we're only just scratching the surface, which I very much echo. So one of the things that I'm quite passionate about and also would like to look more into in the years to come is artificial intelligence and how we can make, because RPA in itself, it isn't intelligent per se, right? If we can connect it to artificial intelligence, then it can be. Like I mentioned before about democratizing technology, I think this could also be quite a cool opportunity for that. So if we can use, for example, RPA as sort of like an orchestrator for artificial intelligence, but the person who builds the RPA doesn't have to have a technical background, then I think we're also opening the doors for a much bigger part of the population to participate in the artificial intelligence industry as well, which I think would be really cool.
So the results of our poll are showing that, people think the key ingredients for making the transition is, ambition, confidence, having a thick skin, managing stakeholders. Do you have any final thoughts for the audience around what it takes and, something to leave us with? Rebecca, if I could start with you.
Yeah, I think all of those words, embrace them. I think sometimes, particularly with women in the industry, like confidence and knows what she's at is almost weaponized sometimes. And it's like, no, it's no different to a male colleague beside me here. So, be confident in yourself, be ballsy, take a chance. Be realistic in what you're doing, but also know that there's going to be times when you're in a room with people who just don't see the vision. And I always say that's their problem, not mine, essentially. Reach out to people around you, be open, embrace opportunities, work smartly. I always say that. So there's hard work, but it's also, do it smartly. So, strategically pick maybe some of the tooling you're working on or the opportunities that you're chasing. And then just, be kind and have a bit of fun along the way.
That's a really lovely closing statement. Be kind, because not everyone's in the same position as you are with what you've learned along the way. It's interesting. Hannah, what are your final thoughts on what it takes?
So I think this also reflects a little bit what I shared in my story about when I first was, introduced to RPA, and I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to understand what this robotics tool does. I just think don't just leave an opportunity like that. Don't undersell yourself. Like, definitely you understand so much more than you do. And like Rebecca was touching on as well, I think it's very typical for women to underestimate themselves, which I think is something that we should all work on. So definitely be confident. And I also think, just take the opportunities that you get along the way as well. My manager recently said to me, like, he's gonna mentor me and he's gonna help me in every possible way to get where I want to go. But no one is going to be a bigger advocate of yourself than you, right? So I think that's also a very good thing to think about every once in a while.
Yeah, that's true. And Jen, you stayed up the latest, so you get the most minutes to bring us home.
So I don't know what the age groups are of the individuals that are watching, but I will say that there's probably never been a better time, regardless if you are just leaving college or if you're looking to make a huge change in a career that you've had for 30 years, for you to try something new like RPA and intelligent automation. There is truly so much opportunity. It doesn't really matter what your background is. It doesn't really matter where you came from. It doesn't even really matter what your skill sets are. It matters whether or not you're curious enough and whether or not you're willing to put in the work to either learn this industry and show that you have the desire and the confidence, as the ladies have said, to do this and to put your all into it. And I really mean it. That is truly the only thing that you need. The only other piece of advice that I would leave you with is take every opportunity that comes your way for a while. Don't say no. Hannah had a really great anecdote about the class that she was in. But she was intimidated in the beginning. But when she realized that it was a pretty pedestrian topic that she, had put on a pedestal, you're actually going to find out that these are really easy concepts for you to understand. And it's going to be very simple for you to grasp them and become a master in them very quickly. So take every opportunity that you can and don't be afraid. Honestly, great opportunity, best time you could ever ask for to get into this industry.
Well, thank you, Jen and Rebecca and Hannah. You've really given us a lot of insight on a very personal level, a very real level, and you've been really transparent with a lot of your experiences. And I think that's what, having a topic like today's topic where you share your story as opposed to sort of a top tips presentation is just really compelling. It's very easy to be inspired by the three of you. So you're responsible for everybody on this call having a really great day now. So thank you very, very much. Thank you for being with us today, everyone who's been a participant in our audience. I'd also like to thank Charlotte Kennett, who's been facilitating today, and Charlotte Aerosmith from Blue Prism, who assisted with booking and coordinating the session. You will receive the recording of this session as well as all of the data from our polls. If there's any input you have on future sessions, please do forward it along, whether it's in the chat box in Glisser, or we do have the LinkedIn group where you're more than welcome to post conversationally in there if you have some suggestions, or if you would like to be a panelist at a future event. We typically post the next Empower Hour in the Facebook group just a couple weeks before it's going to be held. So please join the group and you'll get notified of when the next one is. Thank you very, very much for finishing a couple minutes early, but we look forward to seeing everyone at the next Empower Hour. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.